Hello, I'm Susan Richards, the Garden Center Manager here at New North Greenhouses, and we're in Greenhouse B, one of our production greenhouses, because I'd like to show you how to do a herb planter. It's certainly been an early spring and everybody is very anxious to plant and get their hands in the dirt, but just be aware it is still cold, it is still spring in Northern Ontario. Next week they're predicting maybe cold temperatures again. Hopefully we don't get any snow. So if you are anxious to plant, you can certainly put in hardy asparagus, strawberry plants, rhubarb, and then hardy perennials or trees and shrubs can go in the ground when they're ready and into the garden centers. But today I wanted to work with something that you could do at home if you wanted to have a windowsill herb garden or a little herb garden that you could put out on a nice sunny day and bring in on a cloudy day. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you the plants we're going to use, show you the product we're going to use, and then we'll get planting. So first of all, I'm going to show you some of the products that you might need to do your herb planter. So right now I've got a nice bowl full of container mix, and this is the growing mix that we use at the greenhouse. It's called Sun Grow, and we plant everything in it. If you're just buying a small amount, you may want to buy a bag of fertilizer if you're just doing a bag of soil if you're just doing a small project. And this one says approved for organic use. So if you want to grow organically, you can certainly do that. I brought in some organic fertilizer. This is Fertilo, and it's what we recommend for all edible plants, and it again is organic. And we could certainly work some of that into the soil in your planting container. If you wanted a bigger container, in front of me here, I've got a big bag of what's called Urban Garden Mix. So if you need something bigger than this, there's a 30-liter bag, and that's for organic growing as well. Now, one thing I often get asked is, how do we cover the holes in the bottom of a pot? And what we do here at the Garden Center, we go buy bulk coffee filters. So there's always holes in the bottom, and we need holes for drainage, but we don't want the soil falling through. So if you were planting this, for instance, you can see that big hole at the bottom, and you'd have, when you water or fill, you'd have soil coming out. So we just put a coffee filter in the bottom, just like that, and then add your soil afterwards. Okay? Now you just don't have to use a plastic bowl for planting herbs. This particular one is only $3.50, so it's nice and economical. But if you want to have something a little bit more decorative or fun, you might look at one of our giant teacup planters, and this one actually has herbs on it. So there's this size that would hold 3 herbs, and there's this size, quite a bit smaller, that would hold 1 herb. Okay? They come with trays for drainage and the drainage hole in the bottom, because everything you plant in should have a drainage hole in the bottom. So you can also look at a more decorative container. This one has a cocoa liner built into it. So if you're trying to match your herb container to the rest of your pots and you're trying to make a little set, this size would certainly be good for a herb garden. And it could sit on your patio or your deck. And then if you wanted to do something a little fun, we've got these 13-inch pots. They're quite economical. They are $7 each and come in an array of colors. So if you'd like to, because herbs are just green, if you'd like to have a colored pot and with a little punch of color, or you're giving a gift and you'd like to have a little punch of color to your gift, you could certainly choose one of the plastic pots, and again, stick a coffee filter in the bottom to hold the soil in. Now, a lot of people would like to plant herbs on a windowsill or in a narrow area of their deck. So this is a typical inexpensive window box, and you'd need a couple of coffee filters to do that. But you could have 1, 2, 3, 4, you could put 5 herbs in this size. And this is a 24-inch long, plastic, durable window box. If you'd like something a little bit different, these ones sit on a ledge or a deck railing, and they are actually grooved to sit on a 2x4 or a 2x6, and they come in white and black, And this has a really nice soil volume, so much more soil volume than the first one. You can see the difference in soil volume, so this one won't dry out as fast. And this particular pot, you see those black plugs at the bottom? If you're going to be using this outside where it's going to get rained on, you need to pop those plugs out so that you have drainage in your container. And the last one I want to show you is our big deck box. So this is a great box for putting on a deck or patio when you want an edible garden and you don't want to have to be a slave to watering every day. You'll see it has an insert that comes out. So it's actually got 4 inches of water reservoir in the bottom. And once the plants grow down to there, the roots will go into that water and you'll have a really good reservoir for water. And anything over that 4 inches will simply drain out the bottom of the hole. So this big deck box, you'd have a really dynamite herb garden in it. There's lots of room for things. Or you could have a combination herb and vegetable garden in this kind of a box. Okay, I want to just go over what I've collected here in terms of plants. And you can really choose what you like to grow, because it's so nice to have the taste of fresh herbs in the spring. This one is a variegated or tricolored sage, and although the foliage looks different, it's still edible. The nice thing about this one, it's going to add a little bit of color to your herb garden. We've got 2 kinds of parsley. This is curly parsley, and this is flat-leafed Italian parsley. And if you pick up a plant and it's got a few leaves that are yellow at the bottom, don't be concerned about that. Just before you plant it, do a little pruning, take off those lower leaves, and you're ready to go. Okay? I've got mint. Now this is mojito mint. And mojito mint is great for cooking in smoothies or of course in adult beverages. So it's a nice one. Keep in mind that all mints have a square stem. Any plant with a square stem in the perennial family are aggressive spreaders. So you don't want this in your garden. You want this in a pot, because otherwise it's going to take over in your garden. We've got oregano. Again, oregano is a hardy perennial, just like the mint is, not as aggressive, so it can certainly go into any container or any garden. We've got lemon thyme. There's regular thyme, of course, but the lemon thyme has that beautiful foliage. So again, if you're putting it into a container, you're adding a little bit of nice variegation into your container. Then rosemary, of course, because no herb garden is complete without rosemary. And if you like tarragon, we've got French tarragon, and this one is going to get, I'm just looking at the height of this one. Oh, it doesn't tell me how tall. But if I remember correctly, tarragon's a tall plant, so this might be something that can go in the center of your planter. And finally, I've got basil. And personally, I find basil is best planted on its own. It's a little more finicky than the other herbs. They don't like to be over wet. They don't like to be too cold. They're not going to tolerate going out on a spring day and then back into the house. So what I always do is I plant my basil separately in a separate container. And I keep it out of my mixed containers. And it's happiest that way. This particular basil you might not recognize. It's called columnar basil. And if you want to grow one in your kitchen or over the winter, this is the best basil to hold the longest over the winter inside your home. That's columnar basil. Now, the other thing I brought over, this is a pepper plant, and it's one of our new ones. It's called Hot and Heavy Fire Away, and it's a jalapeno type pepper in terms of its hotness. But don't discount the idea of growing peppers with herbs in a container. In Northern Ontario, we have a short season. You will have the most yield from your peppers if you plant them in a container. And we'll often put them in a pot this size. We often use a red pot, sort of red and pepper go together. But this plant is going to get a good size, and you could certainly put a herb or two with it, or in a big herb garden, you could use this in your herb garden, and you're going to get some nice jalapeno type peppers. So that's the collection of plants I've got for you and the products. And I think what we'll do now is I'm going to show you how to plant a container. Okay, so now we're going to plant a couple of herb planters. I've got a very full container of soil here. And once I start planting, of course, it's going to be too much soil. But I do want to plant that basil by itself in this little teacup. So what I'm going to do first of all is put the liner in that teacup and start to transfer some of the soil out so that I've got enough space to put the other plants in. Now, this soil is quite dry. There's a little bit of moisture to it, but not much. And you should never plant into totally dry soil. So we're going to just give it we don't want it soggy, but we don't want it totally dry either. Because if we have the soil totally dry, when we water, everything's going to sink down. So we're going to water a little bit. So the first one I'm going to plant is this columnar basil. We're going to knock it out of its pot. And you can see that that's a really healthy plant. It's got a really nice light root system. The roots have gone right down to the bottom, so it's ready to transplant. So we're going to break up those roots a little bit, because if you don't, those roots are going to continue to wind around, and you want them to stretch out into the soil. So we're going to make a hole in our pot in the center of the pot, because that's all we're going to put in here. And you can see this is really bushy, but we're going to pinch it to make it bushier. And then we're going to set it down, push it down firmly, and we want the top of the original soil line level with the soil in our pot. We don't want to go any deeper. The only thing, there's two things I can think of that you plant deeper. One are tomato plants, and the other are clematis. Otherwise, you're planting things at the same level they were growing at. So I've got that in there. I'm going to water it again to give it a thorough drink. And we want that water coming right out the bottom drainage holes. And when that comes out the bottom, we know we've got enough water in that container and we've thoroughly wetted the root ball. So this is a bit of a messy job. We'll just, the coffee filter has to just wet down enough so that the water goes through. Now, as I said, I mentioned I was going to pinch. So I'm going to pinch the growing tips off this basil, and that's going to encourage it to bush out even more than it is right now. And in a few weeks, probably 4 weeks, this should really bush out and fill that pot. So it doesn't look like much right now, but that will turn into a really nice plant. And this is something that you could have right now inside your kitchen in a nice sunny window, or in the living room, or anywhere where you've got a nice sunny window, because basil does not like the cold. So now we've got the rest of our soil here in this pot. I'm just stirring it up a little bit because I put some water in, and I want it to be, the soil in the pot to be fairly consistent in moisture. And one thing I do at home is when I'm doing a lot of planting, I take potting soil and 1 bag of compost, and I mix my own in a wheelbarrow. So we do about 1/3 compost and about 1/3 potting soil. I'm not going to worry about this right now, because if you're doing anything for indoors, you don't want that compost in your house. There is the possibility that there might be an insect egg in it, might not happen, but the compost is best left for outdoor plants. So I'm going to pick my tallest growing plant here, and let's see, this Rosemary's Garizo is a tall one. So I'm going to put this in the center of my container. So again, I'm going to bump it out of my pot. Nice healthy roots, going to give it a little bit of a tease to break those roots up a bit. And I'm going to set it a little high, because we can set it down lower afterwards. I want to make sure I don't get anything too low. Oh, there it is. I'm just looking for my basil tag. I'll put it in there. So I'm going to keep all my tags, and afterwards we're going to do that. So this one's fairly tall too, the tricolor sage. I'm going to put it off to the side, tease those roots a little bit, do a little bit of a hole but not put it down too deep. And it's variegated and this is variegated, so I'm going to go, and the time will trail a little bit, so I'm going to go to the other side of the container and get those two variegated foliages a little bit away from each other. Okay. Now we want some oregano in this pot. Again, this is another trailer. So we're going to put it over here at the edge. And we're going to leave some space between the plants. Now you've got two choices when you plant a container. You can really stuff it full for an instant look, but if you're planning on growing something in a container for a while, you do need to leave space between the plants. So I'm going to leave about 2 to 3 inches between the plants. Okay. I'm going to put parsley at the background. It's going to be a bit taller. Now I've got 5 herbs in this container, and that's about the limit for this particular container. One nice thing you could do if you're planting this for outside early in the spring, you could get a 4-pack of pansies and stick 4 pansies in that. It would give you a little color, and of course pansy leaves are edible, so you could certainly have a little bit of color for early in the spring. Now I'm going to tip this up, and you can see how I've planted them up a little high and there's gaps. So if you're doing this at home, you're going to have some extra soil nearby, and you're going to fill in those gaps. I should have had an extra pot of soil, and I didn't think to do that, but that's exactly what you would do. Fill in the gaps in between, smooth it in nicely, and then water the whole thing. And then what I always do is I collect up my tags, I put them together, and I just stick them in the container. And that way if somebody comes to my house and they want to know what we're growing, or you forget exactly what variety you have, you've got the tags nice and handy. So that's a nice mix right there. I didn't put the mint in because mint's quite aggressive, and in this small a dish garden, I think it would totally overtake. I only used 1 parsley, but if you happen to like parsley, you put in whatever you happen to like. And again, the pepper is a little going to get a little too big for this particular container. You need a container that's got more depth to it, and then you could certainly put the pepper in with another few herbs, and you could have a deeper container that would hold better for the peppers and the herbs for the entire season. Okay, and that's how you plant a herb container. The last step in planting your herb container, once you've got the soil all the right level, you're going to take some of this organic fertilizer, just a couple of little handfuls, and put it in between the plants, and then you're going to take the watering can and water everything in. And by watering in the fertilizer, it's going to wash it down a little bit, and that's going to get it down to the root zone. Now this particular fertilizer is based on hen manure. It's an excellent organic fertilizer, but it does have a bit of a smell to it. Don't worry, that smell dissipates in a day. So if you're growing this indoors, you may want to use a different type of fertilizer, or just be aware that that fragrance will dissipate in a couple of days. And there you go, there's your herb container ready to go.